This media is brought to you by Polyscope.
In the realm of tomorrow, where techniques mind, we ponder, we dream.
Awesome. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to finally meet you because it's how we meet each other nowadays, over Zoom. So I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Owain. I am a partner and chief commercial officer here at edu.com, and we are a 24/7 educational platform.
By the way, I love that domain name. How
Oh,
did you get
thank
that? Did that cost you like $1 bajillion?
No, I don't want to disclose that, but I'm sure it wasn't. I'm sure it wasn't acquired cheaply. I just had a raging debate with a friend of mine about edu or edu, and I said, you know what, edu if you want to stay faithful to the edu sort of domain. But he said to me, he raised a good point actually. He said to me, he goes, I kept expecting the domain name in ahead of the suffix, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that does raise a good point. But no, we're edu or edu, whichever you prefer, and we use AI tutors for personalized learning, for test prep, and for professional certifications. So we're right at the sort of the sharp end of technology right now, leveraging technology for the better of education.
Very cool. So are you one of the founders?
I am. I'm co-founder, and I actually came slightly later, but Dr. Michael Everest, who's our CEO and visionary founder, has been kind enough to sort of give me the co-founder mantle, and he was the one who really, he originated this whole concept, and it was before the days even of ChatGPT, and I think it was COVID really that exposed that there were a lot of disparities in education, a lot of unevenness from the human failure factor, and I experienced that myself as a parent. I saw that my youngest school really didn't know what to do in the pandemic, and my eldest school had a very fast and dynamic response, and they went straight into doing remote learning. I think now remote learning is much more acceptable, and in a way that's kind of paved the way for the idea of being able to create tutors on your computer, that are now AI informed. And, that's where we've picked up. We wanted to be able to sort of plug that gap and be able to provide an educational resource that wasn't subject to scheduling, wasn't subject to cost. We describe it as a borderless educational system, and
I love it.
It's tutoring for everyone.
Who is your customer? I mean, who is your customer?
So we are pre-K to grey. The beauty of our platform is that we offer two offerings. So we have a business to business offering where we work mainly with schools. So our main lane is educational institutions, and then we have a direct to customer model where you can go online and anyone you're a lifelong learner, you're a student who wants some school support, perhaps you're just a motivated 6 or 8 year old who has a passion for nuclear physics. Who knows? Whatever.
Yeah, there's a few of those around here.
I can imagine that there might be. My dad was a nuclear physicist. I remember I always tell a joke that when I was 6 and everyone would go around the classroom and they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you'd have all the usual astronaut, actor, fireman. And I had a little pin that said at the age of 6, I love the Fourth International Symposium of Laser Anometry on Fluid Mechanics. I had no idea what that meant, but I thought it sounded kind of cool, And I was a nuclear physicist, just like my dad. So
He's going places. He's going places.
Exactly. Who knows? I didn't end up being a nuclear physicist, but the idea is to be able to, whatever your learning journey, our AI tutors can support that and intuitively adapt to whatever your level of learning is.
So how are you different from everything else out there? Because there's so many different sort of learning mechanisms. There's course academies, there's everything out there. So what makes you so different from everybody else?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, I think that these days there's such a proliferation of offerings that,
Oh yeah, they're everywhere. In fact, it's almost impossible. Like if I wanted to go out and do some courses somewhere, there are so many choices to use, so many places to host it, and there's so many different models, and you don't even know what's best or what works.
Well, and I think you sort of hit the nail on the head, and I think you throw AI in there now as well. And for
Oh,
most
yeah, and they all say they do AI as well, of course.
exactly, and for most people, AI means Chat GPT. And it's interesting when I talk to people, AI is an interesting subject because without knowing an awful lot, everyone fancies themselves as a bit of an expert on it.
Of course.
Let me
Because
tell you
it's so accessible and easy
Yeah.
to use, right? That everybody can use it.
It's interesting because people have very broad opinions on it and they make some very broad conclusions that, on the worst doomsday end of it, it's Terminator and we're all going to be taken over by robots that are smarter
Yep.
than But I think in the, in the evergreen scenario that I imagine, this is a wonderful personalized learning tool where you can imagine a system. In fact, Elon Musk said it even better than I. He had a sit down with Rishi Sunak, the ex-PM of the UK, a few weeks ago, and he said, the future of education is AI tutors.
Mm,
Because imagine, and not just AI tutors who are your teachers, but AI tutors who are your friends and companions. And I
mhm,
think that's the piece that we are yet to get our heads around. Dr. Everest and I, we wanted to make a solution that was not just oriented on education, but our AI tutors are also wellness companions. So we've embedded an SEL, a social emotional learning curriculum, and you can speak to your tutor and you can also talk to them about the stress of learning. The modern classroom is a stressful place, and younger students are not particularly adept at adult things like time management. Oh, I'm stressed about my history test. Give me some coping mechanisms. Give me a timetable or a schedule to be able to plan my studies. Things like that. Our philosophy is at EDU, if you feel better, you'll learn better. And trying
mhm.
to take a holistic view of education. Michael, my partner, is my business partner, is a double PhD. He's a retired surgeon and comes from education as well. So
Wow.
we want to really, really transplant both those modes of thinking into this. So I guess that's our key differentiator. We're the only edtech solution that is also a wellness solution, acknowledging that if you feel better, you'll learn better.
Now you do realize that you are disrupting all traditional schooling with this model, right? How,
We
how
actually,
are they taking it?
we actually think we support it. So, I
No, no,
preface.
no, you're disrupting it, man. Every student is learning the same thing in the same class at the same time. So, and this you're doing the exact opposite. It's completely tailored to each student, I'm assuming.
Well, so there's a little truth in that. I always preface any pitch of this by saying that I'm the son of two educators. My dad was a research scientist. My mum was a teacher. She was my history teacher, actually. So the last thing we want to do is replace teachers. But I also saw how hard teachers worked on things that weren't teaching,
Mm.
syllabus alignment, curriculum, sort of, being able to meet state mandates and, and local curriculum mandates. So we wanted to create a tool that was able to not just help students, but to be a dynamic assistant for teachers as well. They can now set courses through the platform. They can set quizzes through the platform. They can grade instantly. They get a whole set of teacher analytics on the back end where they see who's done their homework. So gone are the days of, oh, the dog ate my homework, because now I know in real time when you're doing your work via EDU, how much time you spent on there, what the answers that you've got right, the answers you've got wrong. And that's also great feedback for a teacher, because now they can say, oh, perhaps I'm not teaching this concept particularly well.
Mm.
So, this has really, really been designed with both teachers and students in mind. Our business to business model actually works by taking the specific curriculum of the school, ingesting it, and then providing like a flipped classroom where the students take home an AI tutor that is informed entirely by the course curriculum that they're teaching at that school. So it's a very supportive framework, and it works for both sides of the schooling system. The
Well,
teacher.
how does that work in reality though? I mean, you've got kids going to class
Mhm.
and they're all learning the same thing, but then they go home with their AI tutor. I mean, how do you keep them all at the same level? Because everyone learns at a different rate and everybody comes in at a different point.
Yeah, and the beauty of this is that we make sure that the first repository of knowledge, we built two small language models, our proprietary ingestion engine and our intelligent curation engine. And what that does, we use a series of LLMs on the back end, mainly for natural language processing. But we wanted to curate that experience. Anyone who's used ChatGPT, for example, as wonderful a resource as it is, I wouldn't use that to teach a classroom. It's,
Mm.
the wild west of knowledge. For every right answer you might get 500 wrong answers and hallucinations. And as you know, anyone who's generated pictures through AI knows.
Hallucinations are the creativity of AI, right?
Well,
Because they always come up
that's
with
that's
crazy
the kind
stuff.
way of putting it. And I think in education, the difficulty about that is that that allowance can't really happen. So,
Right.
we wanted to make sure that we were, there are only two certainties in life, as we all know, death and taxes, but we wanted to make sure that we were 99.9% hallucination free. And we
Right.
do that by making sure that the materials that we train the AI on are specifically the repository of knowledge from the school. So if Dr. Ryan is your history teacher, what we've done is we ingest his materials and then we arrange them in a way that is engaging. So it can be in podcast form, it can be multimedia, it can be PDF. It's a wonderful way to re-energize education. When
Mm.
I was at school, it was just books. You either read the book or you didn't. And, and that really, that missed out a whole sector of the educational community who are maybe non-text-based learners, neurodivergent, dyslexic, autistic learners, people who might have challenges with traditional text-based learning. So again, going back to that borderless educational idea, we wanted to be able to reduce the bar of entry to conversation so that people could just come on, have a platform that completely supported their schoolwork. The AI algorithm begins to adjust intuitively to where you are in your journey. So if you're slightly weaker on fractions, the quiz section will have more questions on fractions. If you happen to be an ace in AP US history, the questions get a little harder in AP US history. It pushes you. So to your point, it's a wonderful personal tool that works from the same repository of knowledge, but finds a level for everyone. So yeah, it's very supportive.
Well, but how does it actually work in practice? So does everyone go to a classroom and they just handed an iPad and they all have different
Yeah,
teaching on the iPad, or is there something that the teacher can teach everyone?
Yeah, it's a mixture of uses. So Sierra Canyon is probably a good example of this. So Sierra Canyon, they use some EDU in class work where the teacher will actually set an assignment and then they'll go through the class and the coursework in class. And then they go home and they'll do the quiz, and the quiz will be based on the class that they taught in class. And then they can revisit the class with the AI tutor whilst they're out of the classroom. So, on our B2C model, maybe for those schools that didn't want to purchase it for in-class usage, either didn't want to afford it or, just didn't see a place for it within their school, we offer a more standardized core curriculum. Now that sort of stands up almost as a school experience in itself. So let's say you need to have, complete sort of, I guess it just sort of fits into the mold of a tutor. It's now your AI tutor. I know that I spend $100 for an hour's worth of math tutoring for my daughter, right? And she'll get one subject for that. For $99 a month, we offer 65 plus curriculum core aligned subjects where you can come on and say, you know what? I'm not so good at pre-algebra. I'm not so good at algebra. I want to go through the basics, and we'll have a series of courses. Some can be 6 weeks, some are 8 weeks, some are 12 weeks, depending on how specialized they are. And that then becomes a supportive tool at home. So it might not necessarily be the exact same stuff that you're learning in school, but like a tutor, covering the basics, covering the fundamentals, bringing your level up.
So, and everyone learns at a different pace.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so outside of the classroom environment, I'm assuming that the tutors are, I forget what the word is, but when it can detect how far along the student is and change its lesson plan based on where they're at and how quickly they're learning.
You're right. So it's sort of like intuitively
adaptive learning. I think that was it. Adaptive.
And I think, I know that you guys are a futuristic focused podcast. I think that is the future of learning as far as I see it. Everything. I come from the world of entertainment, and I've slowly watched entertainment become a much more bespoke experience. We now all digest our media in app form. So gone are the sort of traditional like network televisions of you've got to watch this show Thursday, 8 p.m. Everyone can now download things on their own time. You've got a CBS app, I've got an ABC app, and we watch it at our leisure, And I think that that's how education is becoming. I think that's how a lot of things are becoming. It's personalized. My educational journey is going to look very different to your educational journey. We just signed a big deal with HarperCollins, the second biggest publishers in the world. And we're going to become the proprietary in-book AI agent for them. And what I love about that is, I guess it's the AI cliff notes, the ability to be able to have an AI agent within established, well-known texts that and to have it be a sort of an all-seeing eye that you can ask questions. The amount of times that I was reading books at home for an English class and I thought, oh, I've got this question and I had no one to answer it. And so now contextual comprehension element that can be answered for me. And if you're an ESL or an early learner, it's a reading tool as well. You've got an AI tutor who can score you on your proficiency, on your dialect, on your pronunciation, words that you got right, your fluency. Yeah, it's a pretty neat thing. I wish I had it when I was at school.
But it's not adaptive today. So if I went and took a course through your system, it wouldn't go, oh, he's very familiar with these financial concepts. Let's skip over that and go to the next thing.
Ours adapts in a different way. What we do is we lay out course content, and that course content will be taught to you agnostic of where you're at. But then as you begin to take your quizzes, that's where the level of adaptation takes place. So
Right.
we have a quiz section that becomes harder and harder as you progress through it. And we have what's called infinite test prep. So the platform's been particularly useful as a test prep tool. We've managed to have pilot studies now that show that the use of this has raised students' tests by 15%.
Wow,
And
fantastic.
which is wonderful. It's about 240 SAT points. And there's no magic or sort of, secret sauce involved in that. It's very simple. The more you study, probably the better you're going to get.
Hmm.
So it really is that simple. And the one thing that we found over the 2 years that we worked as EDU labs to formulate this was that the best way to prepare for tests was by doing old tests. And so we wanted to create this infinite test prep engine where you could come on and you could ask limitless questions. And to your point, if you are a PhD in nuclear physics, as the infinite test prep goes on, it's going to get harder and harder and harder until it finds your level. And so at that point, then you've met your educational match, and sort of it really, really digs in deep. So it's, that's where we find our most dynamic sort of alternative, intuitive adaptation.
Right. So is this going to disrupt the school system eventually? Are we going to get to a point where everyone's using this as opposed to in-room classroom training? And if you think about it, I mean, isn't it going to also change the way accreditation is done? Because accreditation is done by a certain number of hours of education, right? So if accreditation is done by a certain number of hours of education and people can learn faster or slower based on this system, won't that run up against it?
It's an interesting point. So I don't think it will necessarily disrupt the classroom. Our hope is that it will be able to provide a resource for tutoring, especially private tutoring, has traditionally been aimed at those people who can afford it. My belief is that education should be for everyone.
Hmm.
And so, when you're looking at
And free too, right?
and free, I mean, that in an ideal world, I went to a public school in the UK, and I was also fortunate enough to have university paid for by a scholarship. And I think if you are in that luxuriant position, then I had my PhD lined up in America, and boy, suddenly the cost of that was very evident. And it was no coincidence that every American friend that I knew in higher education had 4 or 5 jobs just to be
Yes.
able, and probably a massive lot of student debt to deal with after the fact. But, we're thinking about those developed communities where, maybe there's single parent families, maybe, the idea of a tutor just doesn't fit into the economics of a family. Why should that person miss out educationally? So our hope is that being able to provide a personalized tool like this, where you can have it on your tablet, have it on your phone, do it on your desktop at home, that might bridge some of those educational inequalities. Regards certification, it's interesting. So we now offer PIM certified medical accreditation. So obviously with Dr. Everest, we've leaned very hard into medical, into the continued medical educational world.
Hmm.
So now we have the ability to be able to have residents come on and do their CME, or doctors come on and do their recertification. And they love it because it's a fraction of the cost, and it's also done on their own time. And because it's PIM accredited, they can slot it in on their schedule. These are busy professionals. So the ability to be able to go home, and instead of watching maybe a tired old 1980s VHS video, or a sort of go to a lecture that might be a little bit
With the
outdated,
fuzzy
the ones,
tracking issues.
we've all been there with the squiggly lines on them. So, I think hopefully this is the future of that personalized learning. And I think hopefully it will change accreditation for the better. Yes, it might accelerate it, but it certainly gives people the ability to come and do it at home, which I think will be nice.
Right, because I think our whole system is based on the old method of learning, right? Everything is based on you have to take this many hours and this many courses and this many this and this many that. But it should be more like writing the bar exam, where you can educate yourself any way you want, but once you write the exam, you're done, and you don't necessarily need to have this number of hours of education, right?
And I think you're absolutely right. And I think it goes back to my earlier point about education, learning, entertainment. It's all moving in a more personalized, bespoke direction. So it's if we can make the educational experience, the certification experience, the accreditation experience more personalized, I think people now are much more at ease with the idea of doing things at home. Remote learning has become huge. There has been an enormous uptick in people who are now homeschooling, who are distance learning. I think it's become such a viable and acceptable idea. And that's become a really, really wonderful lane for us too. The ability to be able to support that, because I think more than ever, I don't know whether it's a lack of faith in traditional schooling, but there's certainly opened people's minds to the idea that there are other ways to get your education.
Oh, absolutely. And I think COVID has done one of those things where which it's completely disrupted our whole concept of education.
Right.
Because it used to be you had to sit in the chair for X number of hours and listen to so many lectures and do so many put papers, etc., to get to where you're going. And now it's completely blown up again. So it's almost on the good side is that it's turned education into something a lot more accessible from wherever you are, whenever you are.
I think so. And I think, the internet obviously was the first, that proliferation of information. I think to be able to make information accessible, but also I think the key with any technology is how you curate it. For us, we want to keep humans firmly in the loop. We have a whole bank of teachers who vet our material. Our ingestion process has a lot of human oversight as well. We don't just throw this into a machine and hope for the best. I think when it comes to education, you have to have that oversight because
Mm.
there has to be accountability. And I think, Sam Altman said something the other day that I thought was really wonderful because people are challenging and saying, well, isn't AI going to make for a generation of lazy learners? People who just go onto ChatGPT and say, do my coursework for me. And he said, well, look,
It's
that's not.
happening, I'm sure. Some people are doing it.
And the number one concern, I think, with educators is AI giving rise to plagiarism, and
Mm.
I think his answer was interesting, which was, I don't see AI as being a challenge to human creativity. I actually think it as being something that will augment human creativity because now it's about the quality of prompting. And so, my dad used to always say that machine learning ran on a RIRO system. You put rubbish in, you get rubbish out. And I like that. And it's true
That's
that
right.
it's all about the quality of the prompting. So I think we have to keep the human genius factor there, make sure those prompts are still good.
Oh, it's essential. I mean, if you've ever looked at AI output, you've seen AI output. Most of it isn't very good, right? There has to be that combination, and I don't think they've come up with a good term. Somebody suggested the term centaur, where you have a human and AI working together to create output. And I think
Right.
that's where we're going to end up, is you have humans and AI working together to create output, and it's an augmentation of what we can do, not a replacement.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's also going to be an acceleration of efficiency. If you can
Mm.
now get 10 or 15 projects done as opposed to, 4 or 5, I see that as a good thing.
So do you use AI extensively internally for your own work?
We do. Michael and I are a little old-fashioned in terms of, I think there is maybe, and I'm probably giving away my age now, but the modern tendency is to, oh, just throw it in ChatGPT and see what happens.
Yes,
I was an English major. I'm very, very nostalgic and old-fashioned about pen and paper. I like to write everything. In fact,
me too.
as technological as I've become, I've moved begrudgingly into a remarkable pad. I don't know if you've ever seen
Oh
those.
yes, I have one of those.
And I love them
I love
because
those.
it feels like tech assisted old school, and I'm like, I can still feel like I'm writing, but it translates my terrible scrawl into a legible text.
Well, wait, it can do yours, it can't do mine. Mine's
I can't
mine's
do yours.
beyond hope.
How funny. How funny. Michael actually said to me, you should have been a doctor. Your handwriting is that bad. So, but I've loved that because it's still, and I do with my own kids. I have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. I'm still very nostalgic about them being able to read books, real books.
Mm.
I love
Mhm.
the smell of a book. I love the ritual of going home and buying a book and just sort
Oh, the
of
tactile sensation, it's
I love
not to
that.
be beaten by anything. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I have this thing where in Palo Alto there's a book sale that happens once a month, and I just go in there and load up on books. And my wife's like, "You don't need those books." And I said, "Yes, I do." Because
I love it. I'm such a book fan, and I think there is. I was always very, very, very religious about reading to my kids. Like I
Mm,
love that, but if I can pass that forward, like yes, it's handy to have a Kindle that can have 10,000 books on it, but it's not the same. If I
no.
can a book of poetry, or if I can, you know, have the complete works of Shakespeare and actually sort of fold through that. And I'm thinking back to my days at university when we used to go to old-fashioned libraries and you had to call up books from this old, like dusty library. And there was
Oh
something about
yes. I love that.
Blowing off the dust off a book, that was for me, that was a thrill. Yeah.
It's great. So it's time to think like a futurist. This is year 2035, 10 years from now. How do you think that's going to change? And we're going to see a lot more adaptation, of course, but what else is going to change in your space in 10 years?
That's interesting. I mean, things are moving at such a breakneck pace that I'd be loath to sort of try and predict that. But one thing that we're sure of is that we're sort of pretty agnostic on the front end delivery system. I think today it might be AI avatars, tomorrow more likely holograms, goodness knows, maybe personalized AI robots. We're already there.
Hmm.
I think what we've already covered is key to me, that wherever that innovation takes us, and I do think it will be a combination of things that will involve far more personalized solutions, probably a condensing of, I don't know if it will mean that there will be more homeschooling necessarily, but I think there will be more resources and options for people to choose their educational path. And I think that's exciting because I think now that takes out economic prejudice. If I can find, quality educational resources in my home, online, and those be just as respected. I'm definitely of that generation now where when my dad grew up, there was a job for life. You
Hmm.
know, it just doesn't exist anymore. I think
Nope.
whatever field might be, you can expect to do multiple jobs and careers throughout your life. So the ongoing need to be able to recertify, to be able to retrain, I feel like that is more pertinent than ever. And I think to be able to provide a delivery system to keep refining that in a more personalized and adaptive way, that would be truly, truly exciting for me. And to be able to have my own personalized learning pocket, I mean, goodness knows, maybe it's even a chip in your brain. I feel like Elon is already steering us in that direction. We won't need to
Well,
go to
it's like
school. We'll just
what I want
carry
to
it
see
as a
is
matrix.
yeah, remember the Matrix where
Yeah,
he goes, I want to learn how to fly a
I know
helicopter,
very
and then it's
well.
just jacked in. We're definitely going to get to that point. I'm sure.
I
I'm
listen,
absolutely sure of it.
that's
But
so
even
funny.
before we get to that point, we're kind of almost there now, though, right? I mean, because you have ChatGPT and other tools like that can almost give you just-in-time training, right? I need to know this now. Let me go find out about this now. So, do you think we're going to get to the point where we have that sort of just-in-time mentality where you can just hire somebody who doesn't really, who knows maybe basic foundational things, and then couple them with an AI and they can learn on the job as they're working?
I think that still depends very much on the academic ability of the learner. I think
Hmm.
the time thing is I can punch something into ChatGPT. I have two concerns. Number one, is it accurate and factually correct? Because I know
But if
there
they
are
used your system, it would be accurate and factually incorrect.
Absolutely, but then you have to allow for the fact that not everyone is maybe going to uptake that information as quickly. So if you're doing
Right.
it 5 minutes before your interview, you might run into a spot of bother. So
But you
I'm
see, that's the thing. Interviews, there's another thing that needs to be disrupted because if you think about an interview, it's actually a false situation because
hmm.
most of the time, if you're on the job, you can actually look it up. If you don't have the answer, you can look it up. So this will disrupt interviews as well,
I
really.
think so, and exams were always for me a very curious way to test intelligence. It was
Yes,
like
also a false situation.
Yeah, it didn't seem to be a great test of intelligence necessarily, more a test of sort of who could remember the most stuff. So,
Exactly.
I think that we'll see a revolution in paradigms of learning, and I only see that as being for the good. And I think if it's on the matrix, something like that, who knows? I mean, like the instant download of a skill into a chip in your brain, maybe. I mean, who knows? I wouldn't
Well,
bet against it.
I think that'll probably be further out than 10 years out, but something a little bit closer to that. And I think the other piece is sort of like the extension of the accreditation stuff I was talking about before. It's like, how do you know when someone has the right level of skill to perform a task?
Right,
How
right.
how how much education do they need, and how does that education need to be delivered to that individual so you can say, oh yes, this person can do that job. So I think right now it's really monolithic. It's like you got to have this, or you got to have this piece of paper which says you made it through this much schooling to get to this point. But it's going to break up into a lot of smaller Lego blocks where here's a set of skills that I have. I can test for that set of skills, and then now I can have that job. So I think there's a lot of disruption coming in that
I think,
space.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think it will also make for some really fun. You still there, Chris? I lost you there for a second. You
Yeah,
good?
yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. And there was a time when I think you took a very linear path. You're like, right, I've studied this subject. Now I'll go and do X. And my daughter said to me the other day, I said to her, I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And Taylor Swift or the president, or maybe both. And it made me
Why
laugh
not
'cause I was
both?
like, well, you know, who knows? These days, I mean, look, we've got a guy who was, you know, a one-time host of The Celebrity Apprentice, now a two-time president. So, you know, who am I to say if my daughter wants to be Taylor Swift and the president? I'm not going to bet against
Why
that.
not? Why
Why
not?
not?
I always believe that people should have a career outside of politics before they get into politics. So maybe that will
Absolutely,
work for her.
absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
So you can reach me at edu. We go to edyu.com. You can go to info@edu.com or owain.yeoman@edu.com. Thank
Fantastic.
you. It's a real pleasure chatting with you.
Great talking with you as well. And I'll put all the links in the show notes so people can go direct. So thank you so much.
Take care. Have a great day.
Bye.
Pixels and philosophies merge and mold, a future untold, unseen.